Welcome back to the Stratcom podcast. I am so happy that today we're joined by Maryna Vorotyntseva, actually our newest colleague here at the NATO Stratcom Center of Excellence. Maryna, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, hi.
Just a brief introduction. You, of course, have a wealth of experience in journalism, including 6 years as editor-in-chief and 5 years in political communication and election campaigns. And you also have experience in working for the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council from February 2022.
I've joined the team exactly in February 2022. Yeah, it was the best moment to join the government services because of war.
Of course. So from my understanding today, we have the opportunity to discuss some of the kind of newest research on one of the, you could say, darkest, most horrific stories or aspects of Russian aggression against Ukraine. And that, of course, concerns the mass deportation of Ukrainian children from occupied territories by the Russian authorities. Could you maybe sketch out for our listeners what has been uncovered in this latest report of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, this is one of the most tragic and horrible situation in Ukraine, that Russia kidnapped the kids from the occupied territories. You know that Russia destroyed a few huge cities in Ukraine, like Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Popasna, Rubezhne, and others. The city are destroyed completely, or more than 80%, more than 90%. And Russia kidnapped thousands of children from these cities. This process began since the occupation of the cities. First, they attacked the cities with artillery, with the missiles. Then they captured them and kidnapped the kids who were there, who stayed there with their parents or without the parents. As we know that some part of these children are orphans. Some of them were orphans before the war started, but the biggest part of them become orphans during the war. Their parents would died during these military operations. This report is about how Russian propaganda justifies this kidnapping, justifies this deportation, and how the Russians are explaining this criminal case to the Russian public. It's very important for us to know who involved in this justification, who saying something about this. This is a very important thing. The armed forces of Ukraine are killing kids. The Ukrainian government didn't organize the humanitarian corridor for evacuation for kids, and so on. This is a great total fake about what Russia does in Ukraine and how Ukraine tries to protect the civilians, including kids. This research was published on the 1st of June, according to the International Day for Kids Protection, or how to say it.
You know, before we even get to the Russian side of this, to Russian narratives, I'm sure we will discuss this. Let's maybe start by winding back to the very beginning, just so our listeners can understand. And let's explore the journey that these kids have to go through. So once they have been seized by the Russian occupation forces, they are separated from their families during this so-called filtration process, this very kind of abusive screening process.
The filtration camp, as we saw during the Second World War.
So could you tell me more about this filtration? What exactly happens to these kids?
These kids, first they go into this filtration camp, then separated from their parents. No one knows what's going to happen to the parents. If you have a man in this family, or father or grandfather, no one knows what's going to happen to him, because Russian military thinks that all Ukrainian men are supporting the armed forces of Ukraine, and they can be military, they can be dangerous for them. That's why they're separating men. Then kids, they transferring kids to some, camps or something. They are trying to, then they propose the Russian families to adopt these kids from Ukraine. These kids.
That Russian law was even changed to enable this adoption.
Yes, this is absolutely illegal adoption, because these kids has the families, has the mothers, fathers, parents, grandfathers, grandmothers in Ukraine. They have relatives who are ready to take them, but the Russian Federation didn't give this opportunity to bring these kids back. I know that the process, like we have some special services are making negotiations to bring these kids back, but if they kidnapped a few dozens of thousands of kids, but they gives back like 10, maybe 20 kids, and you have to go to Russia to take your kid back. And this is very dangerous for men. For example, for women, I know this practice that the grandmothers and grandparents are going to bring these kids back to Ukraine. Also, it's a very long journey. You have to move from Ukraine to Poland, then to go to Russia. You have to make a long trip to Russia because you could not cross the Ukrainian-Russian border. All the borders are closed. And it's like very tough trip for people, especially for elderly people.
And who are these Russian people that adopt these children? Is it just, regular citizens who really want to have a child? Or is it some sort of state workers? Or who are these people?
Well, exactly, I don't know. But I think all these people are victims of Russian propaganda. They think that these kids had no parents. They are like helpless. They need some help. They need to rescue them. Also, they might think that Ukrainian army were attacking these kids, or Ukrainian Nazis were doing something bad to these kids. First, the thing that they're trying to do is to switch them from Ukrainian language to Russian. They want to change their identity. And if the kid is small, it's very easy to do because, of course, if you're a teenager, you identifying yourself, who you are, where you live, what country you're a citizen, and so on. You can explain this to you and to other people. But if you 4 or 5 years, it's not possible for you to protect yourself in such circumstances. And that's why these people, maybe they're trying to help. I don't want to blame them. But of course, they're victims of Russian propaganda. But because the one way to help these kids is to bring them back to Ukraine and find their relatives, find their families here, and to give this kid back to his family or her family.
And still to continue on the journey of what happens to these kids. So they go through the filtration and they are adopted by these Russian people.
Also, they live in some camps or some schools, in some places for orphans in Russia. And of course, but we know the stories from those kids who already in Ukraine, who had opportunity to go back. But we don't know how many exactly these kids were deported. We have 1600s of cases that we know exactly that these kids were deported. But how many these kids were, we don't know, because Mariupol was a huge city, almost 500,000 of citizens. And some part of them died during the military actions, during the military operations. And we don't know exactly how many of them are alive, how many of them were deported. And in Ukraine, there is a center for defending these kids, and we have the special procedures in the law to find these kids and to bring them back.
But so after adoption, they go through this kind of indoctrination process, right? As you mentioned, attempts to change their identity, eradicate any connection with Ukraine. There's also reports that they undergo some sort of military training. So what does this indoctrination look like? Maybe you can share some testimony of kids, and do kids kind of resist this in any way? Are there opportunities to resist this? And what is the punishment?
The first thing is the Russian school. We in Ukraine, we have the school programs in Ukrainian language, and some kids do not understand the Russian. But Mariupol and other cities, they were Russian-speaking cities, and that's why almost of these kids can understand Russian language. They go into Russian school with a different school program. They are studying when this, in Russia, art, sport, education, all these things are like elements of propaganda machine. This is the part of propaganda machine. And these kids go into the Russian schools and the teachers says them that Ukraine Nazis were destroying Mariupol. Ukrainian Nazis are, attacking the civilians, the Ukrainian, on all this propaganda bullshit. And these kids are trying, some of them who are teenagers, they can think about critically because they have this opportunity. But the small kids are just starting to learn this. It's a huge shock for them because they're looking for their parents. They don't know how to speak to people around them. And yes, of course, it's like most of them who returned to Ukraine, they say there was some physical violation against them, but the psychological atmosphere, the psychological violation, they said about that. Almost of them, they want to go back home. This is if you will ask a kid like 7 years old or 8 years old, he could not explain this like atmosphere. The only thing that these kids are saying that we want to go home. I want to go to my mother. I don't want to live in Moscow or in Rostov. It's not for me. I want to live with my mother in Mariupol, in Melitopol, in all other, doesn't matter, Ukrainian city. I want to be with my friends. And this we have this special like psychologist who works with these kids, who helps them to establish the normal life again in Ukraine.
And on the challenge, of course, of reunification of the families, Russia has Russia creates deliberate obstacles to prevent reunification. So it has no kind of centralized list. These children are repeatedly moved from place to place without coordination. They're even referred to by Russian names, not Ukrainian names, right? So even if Ukrainian families do manage to locate a child, as you said, there are so many logistical, financial difficulties. But so how actually does reunification happen? How is it possible for a Ukrainian family to track down their child? And you said that grandmothers go there. So how does this actually work? Are these children ever treated like some sort of part of like a hostage negotiation, or?
Well, not about hostage negotiation, but I don't know I know that special services of Ukraine, the intelligence services, they are working on it because like it's one of the biggest problems in Ukraine, how to return the kids, because they cannot protect themselves by their own. It's like, and I know that there is a group who working on this program, who works on this project every day. This like those who the Commissioner for People's Rights, the representative of the special services, of the prosecutorial general offices, and other. There is a team who works on this, like operations for reunited. There are some part of kids who was transferred to the Russian border. There was some kids that you have to go to Russia and take them if you are a relative or something. There is a different procedures, and all of them are appropriate for Ukrainians because, like, just imagine if you lost your child, doesn't matter what the way will be to bring it back. You will do anything that you will be needed for this.
You also touched upon the kind of psychological legacy of this on the trauma. And when we think about, in the West, when we think about the reconstruction of Ukraine or rebuilding Ukraine, I think often conventionally these discussions go to restoring trade or restoring energy grids or rebuilding roads and bridges or helping your armed forces and so on. Fixing these types of challenges, of course, they require immense resources, but they require essentially money and they require political will and international cooperation. What does it take to help reconstruction, but with regard to healing these psychological wounds? How does Ukraine think about addressing this immense trauma on a societal scale, this mental health crisis, not only for children, but perhaps for children? Could you share some insights regarding this?
Well, of course, it's if we comparing, it's just the easy way to rebuild the building because you know how to build it. You just need money and the people who knows like how to do it. It's not like rocket science, right? It's not rocket science to rebuild the road. We know how to do it. It's not a problem for us. Just, of course, we need money, we need support, we need some equipment and so on. The problem of psychological trauma of the society is much more complicated because now in the war we're losing the young men, the best men of our society, the best part of our society. A lot of kids are orphans now, or they have no father or other members of the family. And we see now that the small kids, they're playing like war games, on the kindergartens. They are addicted to weapons. And this is like a problem for society because this new generations, like I'm adult, you're adult, you can think critically on what's going on there. And we have this new generation who doesn't speak Russian at all because of political reasons. Now they're rejecting Russian language because of their like political thinking. And the second thing, as these kids are, they live in the informational environment. All this information is about the war. We're trying to explain to the kids what is going on in the country. Why do you have to be safe during the missile attack? What should you do if something will happen to your parents? And this makes these kids like they are old in 6 or 7 years. They look elderly because they challenging the problems for adults. It's not so easy to live in this environment, even if you're adult. It's much more difficult to the kids because they cannot manage all this process by themselves. So, of course, we have the psychological problems for kids, psychological programs for kids. We have this educational programs for kids, how to understand what is going on in the country, what is exactly going on. They are watching, of course, TV, they have the devices, they have access to internet, and of course, they are reading this text, they see these videos, for example, from Kherson and the fleet at Kherson, the destroyed cities. And if you will ask some random teenager on the street what he thinks about war, what he thinks about Russia, you will hear the political culture inside of the teenagers, inside of the kids. It's like it's something new for Ukraine. Just a few years ago, the teenagers, like in any country, they have their own interests, like, I don't know, computer games, like, I don't know, strange fashion for these teenagers, like rosy hats or something. Like, it's normal for teenagers. That's perfect, great. But now this is the political nation inside of them because they see all these things on their own eyes, and it's absolutely life-changing experience for them also. And of course, we will see this trauma in the dozens of years after the war will finish because it's not something that you can forget about after the 1 year or after 2 years. If you saw that the missile destroys your apartment, or if you now were playing football with your friends and now the artillery shelling was on this stadium and some part of your team died just there, it's not something that you can forget. And that's why it's going to be one of the biggest problems for Ukraine after the war, how to organize this communication with these kids, with these teenagers. They will be adults, I guess, in a few years. They're going to vote. Of course, this is going to be like a new political culture in Ukraine. And no one knows what this culture is going to be because the war still continue, and we don't know when we'll have the victory, when the war will stop. And that's why I know how many generations will be involved in this process. But exactly, if you will ask, 6 or 7-year-old kid, he will explain you what is going on in Ukraine, what should he do if something happened, if he lost his mother. And all kids knows that because it's like to brush your teeth. You have to teach this. You have to tell them what to do if something happened to the parents.
So let's also try to examine the Russian side of this, the Russian logic behind this. Let me just, put away all the fancy analyst facade and ask you bluntly, why is Russia doing this?
Deporting kids or justifying deporting kids?
Deporting kids. Is it some strategic move to consolidate control over the occupied territories? Is it aimed to break the fighting spirit of Ukrainian people? Is it just random acts of evil? Probably Putin's regime is also capable of that, just mindless evil. Why?
Kids are the military trophies for them. And you know that Russian population are increasing. Russian population, they are they need the new blood. They need to. All Russian culture, Russian regime is built on the violation of rights. And they can remove some ethnic group, like they removed Crimean Tatars in 1945 after the Second World War. They moved just whole people, few thousands of them, to Siberia and to Uzbekistan. They moving these ethnical groups. They are doing this. This is the part of the policy, part of the strategy, to destroy the national identity, to destroy the political identity of different social and ethnical groups. Ukrainian kids are the military trophy for them. This is the first thing. Just they capturing them because they can do it. The second thing is to undermine the spirit of Ukrainians, because the most sensitive thing for every family, for each citizen, it's the kids and the family. And if they attack this, they're trying to undermine this spirit. But I'm sure this is impossible, because Ukrainians are very angry about that. And they hate those who doing this to Ukraine, who deportate, kidnap the kids. It's not works like that. The only thing that we want to do is to bring all children back to Ukraine. This violence, these crimes, this kidnaps doesn't stop us. Yes, it hurts, but it doesn't stop Ukrainian military or Ukrainian army or the Ukrainian parents who wants to bring the baby back.
And so how does the Kremlin reconcile this political logic with also this idea that they're putting forward that these occupied territories are now Russia, right? There is no limits to the borders of Russia. But then if they're deporting the kids, then who is really staying in these occupied territories? What is the future of these occupied territories?
It depends on how long the war will be continuing, because you know that the part of Kyiv region, Bucha, Irpin, were occupied like 40 days or 1 month or something. And during this month, they killed 1,500 people during this 1 month. That's why no one knows how many exactly people were killed in Mariupol, in Melitopol, in other cities that are under occupation. They are deporting kids. Some families are going to Russia by their own because it's more safe. All occupied territories is the war zone. You have to know that the military activity of Russian army and the Ukrainian army, it's always the missile attacks or shelling or artillery. It's not safe place to live. And also Russians are expecting that the counteroffensive, Ukrainian counteroffensive will be start soon. And they understand that the majority of the local people will support the Ukrainian army. And of course they are scared because they know that all local people will say, oh, Ukrainian armed forces, welcome, we will join you to beat Russians, to liberate our territories. Because if some people wants to go to Russia, wants to live in Russia, it's not a problem. You just take in your luggage and go into Russia. It's not a big deal. Just live there. It's not a problem. But we have almost the majority of people who live in occupied territories. They're waiting for Ukrainian armed forces, and no one knows exactly how many people are there still living. But I hope that soon we will figure out it.
Perhaps one kind of final concluding block that is vital to address is the question of accountability. So March of this year, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Putin and also for this Maria Lvova-Belova, Russia's commissioner for children's rights. How do you see the way forward in terms of holding the Russian regime accountable for these crimes?
Well, I hope that is going to happen, because the International Criminal Court warrant, it's a very important thing, even for Russia. If you know that Putin doesn't go for international trips, he stays in his bunker in Moscow or somewhere, I don't know where is he. And it means that when international organizations are acting against the regime, it works. We see the result. After this warrant, the Russian propaganda doubled her efforts to justifying this. They are trying to explain what are they doing, but it's too late. If you kidnap few thousands of children, it's a crime, and one of the hardest crimes in the criminal law. And
What is very shocking in the case of this commissioner is that there's no attempt to hide this. She actually very openly speaks about this process, and she actually mentions that she herself adopted a boy named Philip, I believe, right? So there's something very perverse about this.
Yeah, that's why they are not scaring of they're doing the crimes, because it's the Russian policy. They are doing crimes and said, so what? What are you gonna do? And we have a lot of cases like that. For example, the destroying the dam a few days ago in Kakhovka. They destroyed the dam and say, oh, well, Ukrainians did that. Oh, really? You know, this is the policy, the violation of law, breaking the law, ignoring the ethic standards, ignoring the values. And this is the specific of what Russia doing. They just don't care about anything. They're doing whatever they want. And it doesn't matter that it breaks the human's life, because it's very hard for children to become to bring yourself in a normal life, to live a normal life after this, because it's the great crime against the person, especially against the person who has 6 years old or something.
Well, Maryna, I hope it's just a matter of time until Ukraine is able to free all of its land and its people and its children. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and for finding the time to join us.
Thank you for inviting me.